The Seahawks hope to be back at full strength on offense against the Rams on Sunday. Unfortunately, that's not going to be the case. Time to break down the latest final injury report and what it means for the Seahawks heading into Week 9 here on our Blue Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, the host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. A special thanks to all the 12s who are listening in here on Blue Friday, whether you're down in Stockton, California, or over in Grand Rapids, Michigan. We greatly appreciate each and every one of you for tuning in and making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. The Seahawks will look to get back in the win column when they host the Rams on Sunday, but they're going to have to do so shorthanded. I'll be taking a look at the final injury report and some key names who will not be in uniform for the Seahawks on Sunday. Plus, going to be dishing out my weekly game plan on offense and defense for a Seahawks victory, picks to click, game predictions, and much more, courtesy of our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Now for your lead story here on our Blue Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Only a few short days ago, Mike Macdonald seemed pretty optimistic that DK Metcalf would have a chance to suit up on Sunday for the Seahawks against the Rams. Thought he was going to be able to practice by Thursday, but as it turns out, that optimism wasn't warranted. On Friday morning on Cairo 97.3, Macdonald said that Metcalf's status was cloudy going into this game. And that was a different tone than what we heard on Wednesday when he was optimistic about the star receiver being able to suit up and play for the Seahawks. And as it turns out, he was ruled out on Friday afternoon. So Metcalf will miss a second straight game with his MCL sprain. In addition, Noah Fant suffered a groin injury during practice this week, and he's going to need some time to recover, so he will not be available on Sunday either. Defensive tackle Cameron Young also out for a second straight game as he continues to deal with knee issues. When you look at this injury report for the Seahawks, obviously Metcalf is the big name here, missing practice time this week. And as we've talked about throughout the course of the last couple episodes here on the show, the Seahawks badly missed Metcalf on Sunday. The Bills did not show respect for the rest of Seattle's receivers with the way that they were playing defensively. They were playing more players in the box than they normally do. They didn't seem as concerned about the downfield threats as you would if DK Metcalf is on the field. And I would expect that the Rams are going to treat this somewhat similarly and probably put a little bit more emphasis on putting an extra defender in the box to make sure that Ken Walker III doesn't get untracked. So this is certainly a big deal. But I also think Noah Fant being out, that is an injury that certainly should not be overlooked, because without DK Metcalf, and I talked about this going into the Bills game, I thought Seattle's main priority on offense to try to compensate for Metcalf's absence was to get the tight ends involved. And they were able to do that late in the game when it was already out of reach. But this is another opponent, given the linebacker injuries and the lack of depth that the Rams have at that position. And even the safety spot, they've got some injuries. John Johnson III is on injury reserve is just one example. This would be an opponent that I would think you could take advantage of with the tight ends in the passing game. So not having Fant and Metcalf, that is a big deal going into this contest. And I'm curious to see what the Seahawks are going to do on the Fant front, because earlier this year when Pharaoh Brown was banged up, they didn't promote Tyler Mabry from the practice squad for either of the games that he was out, and they went with Brady Russell just as tight end number 3. Maybe that's what they end up doing here, but Fant's skill set is much different than Pharaoh Brown, and Tyler Mabry would be a closer practice squad call-up stylistically than what, say, other options that are already on the roster would be. So I think there's a chance Tyler Mabry could be called up here. But the receiver position with DK Metcalf being out, that is still clearly the biggest storyline. And I think if you were looking at any other opponent, it would still be significant. But against the Rams in particular, DK Metcalf has been a menace for Sean McVay's team. Even though Seattle's lost 4 of the past 6 games against the Rams, it hasn't been because of Metcalf not producing. He has 5 touchdowns in those 6 games, and he's got almost 700 career receiving yards, 46 receptions. He has dominated against the Rams in the past. So not having him in this game against a secondary that has been playing better as of late with Darius Williams back from injury reserve, but is still vulnerable to the downfield passing game. They're near the bottom of the league in average depth per target. So they give up a lot of big plays. They are targeted a lot downfield. Not having DK Metcalf for this particular opponent, that is a significant issue that they are going to have to deal with. In addition, on the injury front, this was the news that came out right before the injury report came out. Ernest Jones is now listed as questionable with a neck injury, and that is something that just popped up, according to Mike Macdonald. They held him out at practice today. It sounds very much like he is a game-time decision to play against his former team. This would be a huge loss on defense because you don't have Jerome Baker anymore. He was included in the trade for Ernest Jones and sent to the Titans. You would have to either play Tyrese Knight or Drake Thomas in the starting lineup if Ernest Jones cannot go. And you were hoping to have that built-in advantage of having Jones in the middle with all the reps he's had against Sean McVay's offense from the time he played in LA. You were hoping to have him out there. So this still looks like a situation where I expect, as long as this is not something that lingers throughout the weekend, I would think that this is something that was precautionary and Jones has a good chance to play in this game. But the fact that they had to add him to the injury report as questionable, that should not be overlooked here. That is a significant potential loss for the Seahawks on defense, especially when you consider Kyron Williams is having a great year at running back. The teams that have played the Seahawks this year have ran the ball all over them. You were hoping Ernest Jones is going to be able to have a positive impact fixing that run defense. And so if you don't have him in this game, that's certainly going to be a big loss on the defensive side of the football. If you're looking for any silver linings here, Devin Witherspoon did miss a practice earlier this week, but he is back in action, was not even included in the final injury report. And Draymond Jones, who's got an AC sprain in his shoulder, he has been limited for most of the practice week, but he is not on the final injury report either. So number 55 will be out there for the Seahawks. They should be close to full strength on the defensive line, with Cameron Young being the only one that is out. And not a surprise, Abraham Lucas is going to be held out for another week as he continues to work back from his offseason knee surgery. They are still hoping to get him back after the bye week, and he can make his 2024 debut against the San Francisco 49ers at Levi's Stadium in Week 11. As for George Fant, that is the one big question mark now that has yet to be addressed. And Mike Macdonald wasn't going to give his hand at all today when he was asked about Fant's status. But if he's going to play this weekend, per Macdonald, we will know on Saturday if a corresponding move is made. Otherwise, Mike Jarrell will be in line for his 3rd straight start at the right tackle position. Any way you slice it, certainly dealing with some injuries. There's some question marks, some players that will be out in this game, some guys that we don't know whether or not they're going to be able to go or not. But nonetheless, the Seahawks are hoping that with the hands that they do have on deck, that they're going to be able to play with the Rams, who may have a few injuries of note on their own side, though it does sound like Puka Nakua's got a really good chance after banging his knee on Thursday of being able to turn around and play in this game on Sunday. He is listed as questionable. The Seahawks, unfortunately, they don't even have the questionable tag with Metcalf, so they're going to need some other players to step up in his absence. When I come back, how are the Seahawks going to win this game without DK Metcalf and Noah Fant? How can they slow down Matthew Stafford and a suddenly red-hot offense? I'm going to be devising a game plan for a Seahawks victory that's coming up next year on our Blue Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by our friends over at Game Time. You shouldn't have to think about skipping a mortgage payment when you want to buy tickets to your next big event. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Want to see the Seahawks on Sunday at home against the Rams? You can get seats at one of the loudest venues in the NFL for under $75 in the lower bowl. Great seats, and you can keep the home field advantage alive. seeing your favorite team at Lumen Field. Game Time has deals on tickets right at the day of the event, and Game Time's guarantee means you'll always get the best price to write your own memories. If you find tickets in the same section in a row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time by downloading the Game Time app, creating an account, and using the code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. This episode away by Energy. Our friends over at 5 Hour Energy know that being a passionate football fan isn't just a hobby, it's a way of life. It takes a lot of energy to power through game day tailgates, touchdown celebrations, and of course, overtime, which is why we've created Stan the Fan 5 Hour Energy Shot, a special flavor called Fan Fuel, the energy shot made just for super fans like you, the fans who are the first in the parking lot and the last to leave. We see you. You know what else gave Seahawk fans a bit of fuel this week? Unfortunately, DK Metcalf won't play in this game for a brief while, though. It looked like he was going to be back to give the team a much-needed shot in the arm. 5 Hour Energy knows that no matter what your team is or who you're rooting for, being a fan requires heart, soul, and a lot of energy. Whether you're prepping for the big tailgate or ironing your jersey, your game day to-do list is always a mile long. That's why the limited edition Stan the Fan 5 Hour Energy Shot is here to keep you fueled throughout the season. What's your fan fuel this week? Whatever it is, do it with a 5 Hour Energy. Available at 5hourenergy.com and shipped nationwide. Welcome back to the Blue Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This is your host, Corbin Smith. A special thanks to each and every one of the 12s out there. Thank you, as always, for listening in and making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. And for your second listen, make sure to check out the Locked On NFL podcast, which is now 2 days a week. Our good friends, Tyler Rowland, as well as Tony Wiggins from Locked On Jaguars. They are the two hosts for Locked On NFL. 2 shows a day, awesome insider analysis and insights you're not going to get anywhere else. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On NFL on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts and listen in for free. The Seahawks will look to get back in the win column, hosting the Rams on Sunday at Lumen Field. Certainly a big game for both teams. The Seahawks have lost 4 of the last 5 after a 3-0 start. The Rams are going in the opposite direction. They started 1-4, but they've won their last 2 games. They're getting healthier on offense. They got Cooper Kupp back. They're hoping to have Puka Nacua in the lineup on Sunday as well after he returned last week from a lengthy absence on injured reserve. So these 2 teams are going in different directions. And with DK Metcalf now officially being ruled out, as well as Noah Fant, the Seahawks have some significant hurdles they're going to have to overcome personnel-wise to be able to win this game. As far as how they can get it done, though, I very much believe the Seahawks can still get this W because the Rams, as good as they are with their passing game, especially with fully healthy receivers, this is a team that's had plenty of issues that have cropped up during the course of the season and that 1-4 start as well. Let's start on the offensive side of the football as far as game planning goes. This has been kind of a broken record the last few weeks, but the Seahawks have got to get their between the tackles run game going. Last week, they were playing a run defense that ranked 20th going into that game, and they found no success against the Bills. So just because a team is ranked poorly doesn't mean that it's a given you're going to be able to run the ball on them. But look, this Seahawks team, if there is a game where they are going to get that ground game going again, the Rams before last week were ranked 30th in the NFL in rushing. They currently are ranked 23rd. So they jumped a significant amount last week with that solid win over the Minnesota Vikings on Thursday Night Football. But this is still a defense that has given up a lot of big plays in the run game. They've had issues with tackling. They've missed Aaron Donald in the middle at times, even though their defensive line has played better the last couple of weeks. There are question marks, particularly in the middle. Can the linebackers handle Ken Walker III and Zach Charbonnet? You've got to be able to get that run game going if you want to have a chance to win this football game. Second key for me, when you're looking at this game, schematically, you can find ways to make this work to your advantage. When you're talking about players like Jake Bobo and Laviska Shenault, these two have totally different skill sets and strengths than what DK Metcalf is going to bring to the table. So your complementary targets, they've got to be complementary. They've got to be able to pitch in more than what we saw last week when Jake Bobo and Laviska Shenault had 2 catches combined for 25 yards. And I'm not saying Seattle needs those 2 to have 10 combined catches to win this game, but they have got to be more involved to help pick up the slack without DK Metcalf. And when you look at where the Rams have struggled this year, the intermediate to deep passing game, intermediate in particular is where they've really struggled. What has been a strength for Jake Bobo dating back to his time at Duke and UCLA at the college level? His ability to win in the 10 to 19 yard range. He's not a burner. He's not going to be winning downfield. But if he's running dig routes, he's running crossers, you're running some corner routes with him, those are the kind of plays that are going to get Jake Bobo open. And he's such a savvy route runner. This feels like an opponent, especially if you can get him matched up with some of the safeties for the Rams, that Jake Bobo can have a bigger impact. And then Laviska Shenault, get the ball to him on some screens, run some quick hitters, and let him use his 220-pound frame to create after the catch. And that's been an element that's been missing in recent weeks for the Seahawks. So try to play to the strengths of the players that are going to be in there instead of trying to run a very similar offense and hoping that those two can pick up the slack that way. They're not going to be able to win downfield the way that DK Metcalf does. But they have their own sets of strengths. You got to allow those complementary targets to be complementary weapons by maximizing their skill sets and using them correctly. And I think this is a game that their strengths fit well against where the Rams have struggled this season. And the last big thing for me on offense, dial up some shot plays with help for the tackles. Mike Jarrell, if he starts in this game, look, Byron Young off the edge, he's extremely athletic. He's a twitchy rusher. And on the other side, Jared Verse, the rookie first rounder out of Florida State, he can win with speed and power, and he has been dominant in the last couple of weeks. You're going to need to give your tackles some help, whether that means keeping somebody like Pharaoh Brown or A.J. Barner in to help block against those edge rushers, having a running back stay in the backfield to chip on those guys. You have to create an opportunity for Geno Smith to be able to get the ball downfield because, again, this is a Rams defense. They are second in the NFL for the highest average depth of target. Opponents have consistently attacked them in the intermediate and downfield. They're not one of the worst teams in the league giving up 20-plus yard catches, but they have given up 6 touchdowns of 16 or more yards through the air, which is the 6th worst in the NFL right now. So the big plays, even without DK Metcalf, you've got to find a way to engineer some of those. You've still got Tyler Lockett. You've still got Jackson Smith and Jigba. There are enough weapons on offense that you should be able to get some downfield plays, but you're going to have to set those up more with the run game and get some play action under center to try to create some of those shot plays so you can take advantage of a secondary that has been vulnerable quite a few times this year. As for the defensive side of the football for the Seahawks, first and foremost, Leonard Williams, Byron Murphy II, Jaron Reed, all of the interior defensive linemen for the Seahawks need to stand up, and they need to not just play well in this game. They need to dominate. You're going up against a Rams offensive line that is still going to be missing center Steve Avila. They're going to be missing at right guard Jonah Jackson. They're going to have 2 backups, potentially a third stringer in at right guard. They've been able to win the last 2 games with that lineup. There's some continuity that's being built, but still, you're not playing starters. You're playing backups, and this is supposed to be one of the main strengths of this football team. Players like Leonard Williams and Jaron Reed, they need to go out and they need to dominate, not just play well. They got to dominate in this game if you want to beat the Rams. If they can control the line of scrimmage up front, in the interior, get some pressure on Matthew Stafford that way, and help with the run game, then that is going to dramatically improve Seattle's chances. If they play the way they did against Buffalo last week and they physically get bullied up front, this could be a game that gets away from them quickly with the talent that the Rams have at receiver and the way they've been playing on offense. So to me, the onus falls on that defensive line. They all have to elevate their game against this particular opponent. Second, you got a swarm to receivers after the catch. Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua, they are not your traditional number 1 overall type players in the receiving core. They're not going to beat you downfield. They are not burners, but they are such savvy route runners, and they do an excellent job of creating with the football in their hands, and they're really good after the catch. The Seahawks have got to be able to, once those two get their hands on the football, and even Demarcus Robinson, who's been catching touchdowns consistently for the Rams, these receivers, you have got to get them to the ground when they do make their catches. You obviously want to limit how many opportunities they have to actually catch the football. But when they do, you have got to get them to the ground. You've got to limit the yards after the catch. If the Seahawks are able to do that, then I think that that's going to make it a lot easier from the check off. The third, and to me, maybe the most important key for this game and what's been a real struggle for the Seahawks ever since that 3-0 start. You got to win on early downs. There's been way too many big runs on first down that are setting up second and shorts or not even getting to second down. The Seahawks have got to do a better job as a defense as a whole, winning on those early downs and force the Rams into third and medium, third and long situations where it's more advantageous for your pass rushers. The Bills were consistently in short yardage situations last week, and that really nullified the effect of Derek Hall, Boye Mafe, and the edge rushers. Seattle's got to win on early downs, and it starts with that interior defensive line. Find a way to slow down the run game, win on early downs, and put Matthew Stafford in a position where the pass rush is able to get after him. And with that, you can create some turnovers. Matthew Stafford's got 1 touchdown and 4 interceptions this year when he's pressured. Blitzing has not necessarily been the most effective way to do that, but when you were able to get pressure with 4 against him or even 5 on 5-man fronts, he has thrown 4 interceptions. He has shown that he is turnover prone in those cases. So the Seahawks have got to find a way to win on early down and make it on those second and third downs. Make it that they're long conversions. You open things up for your pass rushers so they can pin their ears back and they can get after Matthew Stafford. I think if they can do that, it's going to dramatically increase their chances of being able to get out of Lumen Field with a win and snap that 3-game home losing streak that is unheard of in the last 10-plus years. To do that, you got to be able to get pressure on Matthew Stafford. You got to put him in positions where it's going to be tougher for him to throw the football with a lot of yardage needed to convert. Coming up next, I'm going to switch gears. We've got our weekly picks to click, plus my game prediction. Do the Seahawks get back in the win column, or the injury is going to be too much for them to overcome with the red-hot Rams coming to town? I'll get to that up next year on our Blue Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by our friends at FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You can bet on everything from Ken Walker III scoring a touchdown on the ground against the Rams, or Cooper Kupp being the first player with a 30-plus yard reception on Sunday. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Welcome back to the Blue Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This is your host, Corbin Smith, and a special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. The Seahawks will look to get back in the win column. They've lost 4 of their last 5, including a blowout loss at home to the Bills last weekend. Standing in their way is a suddenly red-hot Rams team that's won their last 2 games, including on the road in Minnesota, winning on Thursday Night Football to improve to 3-4. They're just half a game behind the other 3 teams in the division. The Cardinals, the 49ers, and Seahawks all at 4-4. This division is as tight as can be. It feels like week 1 all over again. And the Seahawks are going to be looking to get that first home victory since September. It has felt like it's been forever. The Seahawks have won in front of their home fans. As far as the players that need to step up for the Seahawks to win this game, it's time for our weekly picks to click. Normally, my co-host Nick Lee and I are both dishing them out. Nick, unfortunately, with scheduling conflicts this week, is not going to be participating in our picks to click. But as far as my selections for this week, the players that I think are going to have a big game for the Seahawks, starting on the offensive side, I talked about this in the last segment. Jake Bobo was really quiet last week, playing a bigger role with DK Metcalf being out of the lineup, had just 1 catch for 15 yards. And I'm not saying that he needs to go out and make 10 catches and go over 100 yards for the Seahawks to win this game. Obviously, that would certainly help. But I'm looking at Bobo in the red zone in particular without DK Metcalf. They need him with his bigger frame, being a 6'4", a tall, physical receiver that loves to win contested catches. He boxes guys out. He needs to be a factor when they get in the red zone, and I think he's going to be in this game. The Rams have a lot of smaller corners on the outside. Their safeties are not that big either. I think the size advantage is going to be there for Jake Bobo to be able to win with his frame. And so I'm looking at this as a game. Again, you look at the Rams, their struggles this year in the intermediate in particular, teams have been able to get those 10 to 19-yard receptions against this team consistently. They've been one of the worst in the NFL defending those plays. That is the bread and butter for Jake Bobo. He's not a guy that's going to burn people downfield and get 40-yard catches. But if you are feeding him the football on drag routes, on digs, on out routes in that 10 to 19-yard range, he can really create some issues for opponents. So I think that is going to be a focal point in this game plan. I think Geno Smith's going to try to get him involved early. I'm looking for Jake Bobo to get his first touchdown of the season. And let's go with 5 catches for 50. Expect a much bigger factor in this game. On the defensive side of the football, already called out the entire defensive line early in the show, but in particular, Byron Murphy II, I thought, had his worst game as a rookie last week against Buffalo. Going back and watching the film, he is going to be hungry to bounce back. And you look at the Rams offensive line without their starting center, Steve Avila. They're missing their starting right guard, Jonah Jackson. They're down to their third string right guard right now. This should be a matchup that Byron Murphy II can absolutely feast on. The backup offensive lineman for the Rams, not known for their athleticism compared to the starters. Use your athletic profile, Byron Murphy II. Explode in the backfield. Get some penetration. I'm expecting 2 tackles for loss, and I think he gets to Matthew Stafford in this game. I think he gets his first full sack as an NFL player in this contest. So I'm looking for Byron Murphy II to be the one who benefits most from those backups being in and using his athleticism to create problems in the trenches. All right, now, without further ado, a drum roll here, please. Game prediction time. Last week, Nick and I both picked the Seahawks to beat the Bills. That obviously didn't come close to happening. Seahawks are a 1.5-point favorite going into this game. I am curious if that number changes at the last minute with DK Metcalf not being in the lineup and Noah Fant also being out. But for now, it is still a 1.5-point favorite odds for the Seahawks in this game. I expect this to be a back-and-forth affair, and as well as the Rams are playing, there are some clear deficiencies on this football team. I still think this offensive line is very suspect of the injuries that they've got. The Seahawks should, in theory, be able to have a big advantage there with the talent they have along the defensive line. Now, will that actually bear out in the field? We'll just have to wait and see. But I feel like that should be leaning towards the Seahawks. And I think the fact that even without DK Metcalf, you're playing a defense that has had trouble defending the run. I think Ken Walker III is going to get going some this week. I think Zach Charbonnet is going to get some nice carries. And I think the middle of the field, attacking the linebackers and the safeties, I think the Seahawks right now, that is their best way to move forward without DK Metcalf, because you're not going to be able to get all those chunk plays they normally can get with number 14 in the lineup. But you can consistently move the chains in that intermediate game with Jake Bobo. I think Laviska Shenault, in his own unique way, can be effective with more of the quick passes. You can get him involved in the intermediate passing game. He is more likely to be a guy that you might be able to sneak downfield once in a blue moon and he can make a big play with his speed. But intermediate game in the passing game off of play action as the preference, if you can get that going, I think the Seahawks have what it takes to win this game, even without DK Metcalf. So I'm going to go with that victory. At some point, the Seahawks are going to play better football at home. And the Rams, as well as they played the last couple weeks, the opponents that they've played have been dealing with some injuries in key spots as well. The Seahawks are at full strength in their defensive line. I think that is going to be the difference in this one. And I expect it's going to be a little lower scoring maybe than people expect this week. But I'm going to go Seahawks 26, Rams 23, another very close one. I just think that this is a game with two teams, even though they're going in opposite directions heading into this game. This is a game of desperation, more so for the Seahawks because of how they've played over the last month. And I think there's going to be some want to prove juice going on out there in the field. They want to prove that this team can get back to playing the way they were early in the season. And the Rams, they've been playing with some house money. I just think division rivals, they know each other well. I like the Seahawks in this game. We'll see if they actually back up that confidence this weekend. But Seattle, I think, gets this 3-point win. I think they get to 5-4. But it is not going to be easy. This is a talented Rams team that's given them a lot of problems over the years under Sean McVay. I just have a feeling that this game that they're going to be able to finally crack the code a little bit with Matthew Stafford. We shall see. If the pass rush is not there, then my prediction might end up turning completely lopsided. But I have the Seahawks winning by 3 in a game that I expect is going to be tooth and nail, back and forth from start to finish. As always, you can follow me on X and Threads at Corbin Smith NFL. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. Coming up on Sunday, a couple hours after the game, Connor Benintendi and I will be teaming up for our weekly post-game show. Make sure you're listening in as we dish out game balls, and hopefully we're breaking down a Seahawks victory at Lumen Field. Enjoy the rest of your Friday, and thanks for listening in. Go Hawks.